Good evening and welcome to this launch of a very special book. I say special for several reasons. This is Sainath's first book for young readers, and when we announced it, we had many reactions, very surprised reactions, saying, "Oh, Sainath has written a children's book." And also, I think it is the first such graphic adaptation of a non-fiction book of this kind. And for Tulika too, it is a first in a sense of this kind of book. We have launched a category called Tulika Graphics, which is for graphic novels and graphic books. But this is the first one which is an anthology in one sense of graphic illustrations. We have 16 illustrators who have done the 16 stories. So that's, I think, a first of this kind of a book, and certainly a first for us. And those are the 16 illustrators. That's Kripa's here, the illustrator of the first story, Farsabai. Then Salihan, illustrated by Antara Raman. Bhagat Singh Jugian, illustrated by Ikrup Sandhu. Shobharam Gehewar, illustrated by Bao. Mallu Sorajyam, illustrated by Satwik Gade, who's with us. Captain Bhav, illustrated by Sagar Kolwankar. N. Shankaraya, illustrated by Siddesh Gautam. Bahaji Mohammed, illustrated by Nivedita Subramaniam. Lakshmi Panda, illustrated by Madhuja Mukherjee. The Panimura Trio, illustrated by Kavita Balakrishnan. As you can see, it's about 3 heroes. The Magnificent Seven Heroes by Priyankar Gupta. Ganapati Yadav by NBC. Bhavani Mahato by Priya Kurian. H.S. Doreswamy by Rajiv Vaip. Telu and Loki Mahato by Alan Shaw. R. Nalakanna by Anthony Gurus. So these are the 16 heroes in the book, unknown heroes, and the 16 illustrators who have illustrated them. So as I said, meaning it really adds to the diversity of the books. The heroes are from different far-flung parts of India, and we have these 16 illustrators from different parts of the country. For us, we have been working with illustrators in our so many years, but this is the first time that we are doing a graphic novel of this kind. So we did ask several of them who have worked for us to do them, and some of the illustrators suggested others, word of mouth. We had a list of 16, and all of them, when we made the proposal and said, would you be interested, they were all thrilled. All of them reacted saying, we are honored to be part of a project, of a book which Sainath has written, and so on. So it was easy to start, and so many fanboys and fangirls on this project Sainath, and so that was a good start. And we started, a bit of the backstory, which is that we saw this on the Pari website. No, going back even further, we had Sainath. I mean, people are surprised that Sainath has done a children's book, even if he hasn't written it for children, it's adapted. But as early as the 2000s, we had this bookstore, a children's bookstore called Good Books. And we had invited Sainath. I had just asked him, will you come and talk to the children? He readily agreed, and he came. And these were children from about 6, 7 onwards to older children, packed. And we, to the first time we were doing something like this, and there were teachers, there were parents. And he gave a wonderful talk about, I don't think you remember, Sainath, but it was about fast food and the corporations, the multinational corporations involved, how they operate, and children were all listening. And today some of those children are 30 and 40 years old, and they still talk about that, they remember it. They have books signed by him. We didn't have any of his books, of course, but whatever books they bought, you know, they had got it signed, and it's a very precious possession. And so it started then, and hearing him talk then, we said we must get him to write for children. He is such a natural storyteller. And I did suggest it to him, but he suggested a couple of ideas. He said, great ideas, but I just don't have the time to do it. And so it didn't happen. But in 2018, on the Pari website, which, as you know, he has founded, this wonderful website, there were a couple of stories on the freedom fighters, on the unknown freedom fighters. And we said, you know, we have to do these books for young people. And we wrote him, and in our excitement and enthusiasm, jumped the gun, did one story, illustrated it as a graphic novel. I mean, we knew it had to be illustrated. How do you make it appealing to young people? So it was illustrated in a graphic style. We sent to him. That's when he said, no, I have so many more stories to do, and I don't want to get into anything till I finish them, and it will be published as a book. And next step. So we left it, and suddenly, out of the blue, 2022, around August, I think, I get a call from Sainath saying, okay, I've cleared it with Penguin, and you can do the book. And I had expected that we'll have to wait for the book to be published and then, you know, ask him again. But he made it all very easy, and we started work, finished all the formalities, and started work on the book in around April. And we wanted to release it on August 15, 2024, and 2023. We almost did. We announced the pre-orders on August 15th, and a week later the books were available. And and then put together this list of 16 illustrators who, as I said, were very happy to do it, and they were all quite, we never have illustrators committing to such short time schedules, but all of them did, and that's how the book happened. And it has been a great learning process for us, putting this book together, editing the stories for a graphic adaptation, keeping the reading level in mind. I mean, it starts from, say, 10, 12 years, so middle to high school. And of course, when it's young adult, it goes up to 25, 30 and older. And so to kind of edit it in a way that we keep the whole picture, don't lose out on important things, and keep the visuals in mind, and then sent it to the illustrators who, you know, gave their own. I mean, we did ask them to do it in whatever style they thought worked, and they did. So we have very different styles, very different ways of interpreting the stories, and they all work. It has been a great experience for all of us. And really a very fulfilling process. The choice of ACJ as a venue for this launch was to address a young adult audience, journalism students particularly, as they are becoming aware of the power of visual storytelling more and more. As journalism moves to online platforms, visuals become more and more integral to the process of telling, communicating, and understanding news and related stories. The session today and the interactions is an opportunity to gain some insights into the process of creating visual narratives from non-fiction texts. And students of ACJ, of course, are very familiar with Sainath. He's been visiting faculty for many years now, and two of the students will Ankita are moderating the session. They will address their questions, their impressions of the book to Sainath and the two illustrators, and they will all discuss. And Satwik is a political cartoonist at The Hindu and an award-winning children's illustrator and comic artist. Awards are for Tulika's books, at least, a couple of them. And Kripa is also a children's illustrator. She's an art educator and works with grassroots initiatives. So we will begin by releasing the book. So will you release the book, please? So happy to have him here and thought we shouldn't lose the opportunity.
Actually, I do remember the lecture on fast food, Radhika, and I can bet which two lines those people now in their 30s remember. I sort of messed up their childhood enjoyment of McDonald's. There was a phenomenal book, and every journalist ought to read that book by Eric Schlosser, a journalist in the US, who wrote Fast Food Nation. And it's an example, and it's a brilliant example of how to do research on a subject. Remember that when you're writing about a corporation whose whose value is greater than the GDP of several nations, you are inviting legal problems. But Schlosser wrote this phenomenal book, Fast Food Nation. There were two things out of it which I converted into my idiom. One is the beef burger of McDonald's. Each bite you put into that, each bite you take of that McDonald's beef burger, you are very likely to be biting into the meat of up to 100 to 150 cows mixed in a vat and frozen for up to 1.5 years. Okay? That's one part of it. You know when you see McDonald's and Wimpy's and Burger King, do you notice that each one of those has its own particular fragrance? Yeah. Do you know what? If you keep that burger around for 6 hours, the fragrance will be a stench. You know how that fragrance comes? 6 industries in New Jersey called the aroma industry. So like you put mustard, butter, cheese, you add a little fragrance. So there are exclusive fragrances for each of them. And you can see the photos of the aroma industry units in Schlosser's book. Yeah, so I do remember that. Enjoy your next burger. Okay. And incidentally, when 100, 150, the giant vats, 100 to 150, I don't remember which, but not less than 100 cows, their meat is mixed. You should also know that the risk of mad cow disease exponentially increases. Yeah? And then it's frozen. So, as they say at the McDonald's counter, have a nice day. So, that's about it. I just love what you guys have done with this book. Yeah. I just really love it. And the quality, the sheer quality of the illustration, and I would have been very, very upset. I looked at it hesitantly because the people in this book are too important to me to be trivialized or underdone. You've got them perfectly. You really have. This started around, in 97, I did a bunch of stories on forgotten freedoms, become very relevant in 2023. That is to show, there are 4 points I'll make about the book and let you get on with the real discussion. One of the problems plaguing our history books, and generally the telling of history, with the great exceptions of my own teachers, who included Romila Thapar, Bipin Chandra, Sabyasachi Bhattacharya. K.N. Panikkar was my guide. Poor fellow, I never completed the MPhil, but he was a wonderful guide. So I learned a kind of history from there. I didn't train as a journalist. I teach at journalism schools. I trained as a historian. And it was always stuck with me who these people were, and I knew where the major revolts had taken place. Incidentally, all the great revolts of the freedom struggle originated in villages, not in the cities. Now, immediately, a lot of people will stand up to correct me saying, what about 1857, Lucknow, Meerut, Kanpur? It was not the people of Lucknow, Meerut and Kanpur who rose. It was the soldiers in the cantonments who rose. You know why? Here's something you need to know about your soldier today, about the Jawan of today. The Indian Jawan is a Kisan in uniform. And Gopal, that was the essence of that slogan, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. Right? I mean, they were bonded. At Singhu, in the farmers' agitation, when I was speaking many times on the platform of the farmers, the first time I went there, it was winter sun, and I felt someone was flashing a mirror in my eyes. And it was about 100 odd ex-servicemen sitting with all their medals on them. Yeah. When I spoke to them, they ranged from Havaldar to Major Generals. And they said, while we are talking here, fighting here for our rights and your rights, our sons and grandsons are defending your border. And these were the people they dubbed Khalistanis. Okay? These were the people attacked in the media as Khalistanis. Our sons and grandsons are defending your border as we stand here with you today. The Indian Jawan was always a Kisan in uniform. He had to reflect the mood of his village. So if you're in Kanpur or Meerut or Lucknow, and you get the 1857 was not a sepoy mutiny, it was the greatest agrarian uprising in history to the date. When they got news, you got news that your entire 48-member joint family clan had died of hunger, which had happened in large scale after the British meddled with land and dispossessed a lot of people in Awadh, really speaking. Okay. That was the flame point of it. It was not a mutiny. It was an agrarian uprising. So I knew where the revolts had taken place. I knew that all the major revolts had started in the villages, and this is how it would go. In 2000, around late 90s, early 2000, I started getting worried. They're dying out. By the way, they are a sturdy bunch. 6, 7 of them are still alive. Comrade Nallakkannu in Chennai is the baby of the group. He's 98. Yeah. Shankaraya is 102. And Babani Mahato is 105 now. Now 105. So imagine, I mean, they lived much longer, but then I started racing. However, the agrarian crisis came and took over my life and messed it up and messed me up for many years before I said I must do something before the 75th anniversary. Wherever I went anyway, even on any other reporting, I have the habit of asking, are there any freedom fighters in your village? So some people would say yes, and some people would say, सब मर गया लेकिन वो शाहिद पुत्र तो है गांव में. There are the sons of the martyrs and daughters of the martyrs are here. There's a reason why I tell you this. I hope you love the stories. I believe you will. But I want you to know one thing. These are the 4 points about the thing. 1, the Indian freedom struggle was the most incredibly diverse spectrum in which every caste, class, community, background, social background participated. Every political force but one. One did not participate. And the Shobharam Geharwar in this book, we felicitated him 72 hours ago in Ajmer, and we got him felicitated by 3 cabinet ministers and 2 ministers of state in Rajasthan on a platform before 10,000 people, because the man had never ever been congratulated on his heroism. And in the original book there is one additional little twist to it. There are, for the present generation, QR codes which will take you to the website that I founded and run called People's Archive of Rural India. We publish in 15 languages every day. Now, if you read Shobharam Geharwar and you look, he said it again the day before yesterday, when 3 days ago, when I said, who all participated in the freedom struggle? He said, everybody except the RSS. वो लोग एक उंगली नहीं काटा. They never got one cut on a finger. That's what he said. And he addressed the girls' college, Sophia Girls' College in Ajmer, with about 300-400 students, who stood up 3 times to give him standing ovations. And at 98, he walks faster than I do, and I walk fast. Yeah. But he's shrunk, From last year also he shrunk a bit. And he was a guy who gives you such insights into the stupidity of our political debates today. He's a self-declared Gandhian who also admires Ambedkar, who also participated in making bombs in the revolutionary underground. When I asked him about making bombs, he said, मैंने दोनों नदियां में गया, गांधीवाद और क्रांतिवाद. The Gandhian path and the revolutionary path. What a lovely line. Gandhivad or Krantivad. I went in both rivers. Then I asked him, he asked me to take him to the center of the city, Ajmer, because it was April 14, he wanted to garland Ambedkar. I took him and quaking, because, by the way, all these old ladies and gentlemen, they have two qualities. One, they all have a sense of humor, like Hausabai telling her own story. They all have a sense of humor, and they are pretty cantankerous. At age 98, 100, when, as a journalist, you've got to ask a question to which you know the answer for the sake of the audience. Malu Swarajyam humiliated me on a public platform. Okay? And so, when I asked, after he garlanded Ambedkar, I said, you are a self-declared undying Gandhian. He said, yes. I said, how does a Dalit like you choose between Gandhi and Ambedkar? He lost his temper. They lose their temper. You know, at that age, the reason I believe is that people have been fighting for 80 years. They take anything as a challenge and fight with you. So, he said, choose between Gandhi and Ambedkar. Why should I choose? You choose. What I do is none of your business. And he said, you choose. Why should I choose? He said, those principles of the Mahatma which I revere, I swear by, I live by. Those principles of Baba Sahib that I revere and admire, I follow those. Who is anyone to tell me to choose? It suddenly made the present day debates, he deflated the present day debate. You know, either one is a villain or the other. In just three angry sentences, took it out. I'm going to, the next thing is, one is the width of the spectrum. Who were these people? They were farmers, laborers, cooks, couriers, housewives and homemakers. They were carpenters, malis. You know, my book, the first version of it begins, the introduction begins with a line by the Mahatma. Great men seem to be the cause of, appear to be the cause of revolutions in the world. In truth, the people themselves are the cause. Yeah. Then, that was 1931. 16 years or so, 17 years before that, in 1914, being felicitated in London by Sarojini Naidu and the labor elite and everybody else, being praised for what happened in South Africa. It was of course Gopal who showed me the quotes that actually fitted the people in this book. In 1914, Gandhi says, after hearing all the praise, he says, your felicitations, essentially he says, your felicitations are to the wrong address. I was just there, Vakil. The struggle in South Africa, the victory was that of the indentured laborers, without whom nothing could have been done. A year later, he says similar things after visiting Champaran in 1915. So who are these people politically? As Shobharam said, leaving out that part of the spectrum, who never got a cut on the finger, it also was a lesson to me. Don't pigeonhole these characters in one slot, one ideology. They were open to many influences. Shobharam is the great example of that. I came to conclude that politically, most of them, they went into different political parties. Congress, Socialist Party, the Communist Party, the CPIM, the Peasant and Workers' Party. They went into various political formations except the RSS. And I came to conclude that this generation, in my book, were people who were leftists by ideology and Gandhian by moral code. Leftists by political persuasion and Gandhi by personal following. After all, we do know quite a few communist leaders who were more Gandhian than anybody in the Congress party. Yeah. An EMS who wrote that book, The Mahatma and the Ism. and evaluated in this so beautifully, the book. So this was an incredible political spectrum, complex. I would say all of them were left in this book, but all of them were also not with the left in their party form or anything else. Two people have, so social diversity, political diversity, the whole spectrum, and when you read your books, of course, this was also meant to be a counter to the great man theory. That's why there are 5 women freedom fighters. You don't find them in the general history books. It's always men. Because, we went and made laws that excluded the role of women from our laws. Swatantrata Sainik Samman Yojana 1980 asks you for 7 possible credentials. I call them the 7 laws of bureaucratic suffering. If you went to jail, you produce your certificate, 6 months at least. Concession for girls and Dalits, 3 months. But millions of people, most revolutionary underground people did not go to jail. They died when they fought with the British. Right? And millions of women did fantastic things without the recognition. Hausabai Patil, just what a sense of humor and what a quite cantankerous, deadly sense of humor. Hausabai Patil was part of the revolutionary underground called the Tufan Sena. Most of them went into CPI, into Peasant and Workers' Party, and into Congress. Her family went to Congress later. She could not be recognized because one clause in the law says, believe it or not, it specifically excludes revolutionary underground unless you were declared a proclaimed offender by the British. We are asking the colonial power to certify who our freedom fighters were. It would exclude most of the people who fought in the INA. They didn't go to jail. Some leaders went to jail. So, Hausabai, her story starts in, I'm giving away a little bit, okay? Her story starts in 1943. She's 17. She's already mothered a child at 14 or whatever, and the boy's 3 years old. I met him. Wherever we went, by the way, we asked the families of these people to release the book in their language. So, Hausabai is being thrashed outside the police station in Bhavani Nagar in Sangli. Slapped around, thrashed, punched, hit her abusive alcoholic husband. They're right on the steps of a police station, right in front. The police do nothing. Why should the police do anything? Man beating wife, this is India, national sport, why the hell should we do anything about it? So then he picks, her brother is there, she's appealing to the brother, take me to your home, in that corner of your plot, you give me one, I'll build one juggi, I'll build one hut, I'll live there. Brother, of course, good Indian brother, says you are your husband's property. So he refuses. Then the husband picks up a rock and says, I'm going to smash your head. Then the police come out, because murder on their doorstep, there are going to be hard questions to answer, uncomfortable ones. So they intervene, they reconcile these two after many scoldings to both of them and say, now please get out of our precinct area. The railway station is behind them. Then they said, Sahib, we don't have the money for railway tickets, how will we go? The police put them on the train, stick tickets in their hands, which 74 years later, Hausabai tells me, I don't know if they paid for them, but they gave us tickets. They put, and saw these guys off, chugging off into the sunset in their steam locomotive, and returned to the police station to find that Hausabai's comrades had looted the police station of all its weapons, ammunition, and money. And the whole thing was a fake. Though that was not her husband, he was a fellow underground revolutionary in the Tufan Sena of Satara uprising. The brother was not her brother, he was another comrade to facilitate their escape. And that was the kind and spirit of the character. When I asked her 74 years later, Hausabai, what is the enduring memory of those events? She says, that scoundrel comrade, he hit me too hard. I said, did you tell him to stop? She said, I was screaming at him to slow down or stop. But he said, comrade, it has to look authentic. Only then the police will come out. So that's Hausabai. And which was the other one? One of my favorite human beings, another person, she loved all of us, okay? But you asked her what she considered, she didn't suffer fools gladly. You asked her what she thought was a motivated or a dumb question, she would come down like a ton of bricks on you. At age 84, now Mallu Swarajam was part of the Telangana uprising. Guys, the only woman ever. What woman? Girl, she was 16 when she became the leader of all the Dalams, male and female, in the Bayaram, Warangal area, which was the hotbed of the uprising. Warangal. Okay? Then she was using a rifle. But she started killing Razakars of the Nizam's army at age 13 with slingshot, which she had learned on her. Her father was a middling landlord, some 200-300 acres. And when he died, she and her brothers called off. They had serfs and slaves. They had slaves, literally. I mean, Telangana is even today a feudal area. That time it was probably more feudal than anywhere, including Kerala. And they called all the serfs and slaves and everybody else, declared them free, and distributed their land to them, each keeping that much small acreage for themselves. They distributed to the men and women their father had exploited. That's the kind of spirit of these people. Mallu Swarajam, interview in Marriott Hotel, 1,500 techies, all from ThoughtWorks, the away day or annual day of the ThoughtWorks people. All age group, maybe your age group, 21 to 24, 21 to 25. And I had to ask her the question, is slingshot an effective combat weapon? I've seen Bondas use it to hit wild boars and stun them. Irulas take out birds with it and rabbits. But is it useful in human combat? She got mad. TV cameras, everything on us, okay? This 84-year-old stands up ramrod straight and produces a slingshot. Puts a cricket ball in it and starts swinging. Everybody ducking. The interpreter is ducking to not get hit. Then she looks at all the terrified young faces in front of her and says, okay, I'll take out the stone. The cricket ball. And she keeps it aside and then shows them. When asked about, the students asked her, the techies asked her, you fought with slingshot and rifles. We are techies. What can we do? You fought for justice with a slingshot. We can't do that. We can't fight for justice with a rifle. She answered in one line. Yes, the slingshot was my weapon. The laptop and the mobile phone are yours. Use that to fight for justice. What a character. The Wazir of the Nizam, at the top levels of the Nizam's rule, they declared a prize of 10,000 rupees on her, dead or alive, on her head, which, by the way, translated in those days into 83,000 kilograms of rice at 12 paisa kilo, 1946. That was the value the Nizam placed on Mallu Swaraj. And I think both Kripa and Satwik have really, really captured the spirit of these people. I was very wary of what they would do, or the illustrators would do. And of course, all illustrators put the narrator in, so I see 16 versions of myself in the book. But the versions, I like the way that many of them have started with those people as young people and then, aging. And how you're using one style in the early life of Hausabai, and in the later pages, you're filling it out much more because it's bringing us to the present. So it's fabulously done. And this book is why I also feel, incidentally, even I write for young people, even when I'm writing in a newspaper. But what's so important is that this is for a generation who have been robbed of their history. Mine is the generation that did the robbing. Yeah. Me and the Vishwaguru. So that is so important. I've been at about 40, 50 colleges and universities since the book came out. I begin with a Q&A. So why did we throw the British out? What did they do to you anyway? And absolutely stunned by what each time, by what I know the answer is going to be. By what I know, there is no knowledge of a regime that brought 31 famines, including 24 major famines in which the major ones were classified by more than 1 million deaths. The first of the famines, 10 million. Great Bengal famine, 1770. 1776, Doja Bara, the skull famine, because there were so many millions of skulls lying in the countryside. This was it's horrible how little we know and remember. And to students of ACJ, students going in for journalism, I ask you this question. In these, today, August we celebrated 77th anniversary. And 76 years completed of independence. Usually big events are celebrated for 3 years. Gandhi's centenary or Tagore's 150th. In these last 3 years, can you think of a single magazine cover story on what India fought for independence and why? Can you show me a single newspaper series on what did colonialism do to this country? Can you show me on any channel, the only thing you could see on the channels was reruns of Richard Attenborough's Gandhi. On how many channels did you see a channel make a documentary about 75 years and why that struggle happened? Yeah? It's just appalling. What we did instead was to the government of India created a website at 110 crores effort for Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav. The website is as spectacular for the reason that this website does not carry at 110 crores backing a single photo, a single video, a single story, a single quote by a single illustration of a living freedom fighter. You can find many names on the official pension list. You can find Nalakanna, you can find Sankaraya, you can find all of them, but what the heck? Yeah? Not one. I'm not saying that there are no photos on the website. There are many photos on the website. You all know whose photos. The same photo that is there on every COVID vaccine certificate. The same photo which will be, if we are unlucky in May 2024, on every bus ticket. So it's just appalling that they create such a website. There is one thing that they have forgotten. Oh, by the way, they've included paragraphs on 4, 5 of the heroes in the last heroes. Somewhere, very hard to find. Not on the search, but you can find it if you look. And this is how you remember your freedom struggle. I really, when I wrote the book, I rang you up and told you it's done, because I really loved the idea of a graphic adaptation, easy to read. Too many of the young people I know are totally absorbed in manga comics, in the extreme violence of manga comics, and in superhero stuff and Marvel and stuff like that. These are superheroes as well, each and every one. Ordinary people who stood up to the world's mightiest empire. They all have a sense of themselves as special. They all have a sense of themselves as being very small cogs in a large thing. Hausabai repeatedly says, I did some small things during the freedom struggle. I made nothing great. I did nothing great. Yeah, these are just lovely human beings. This is our golden generation. In the next 5 years, not a single one of them will be alive. And your generation and your younger siblings and future generations will never get to talk to, meet, see, listen to, engage with, just touch a bona fide fighter who fought for the freedom of your country. And how many serious philosophical questions. Imagine the loss. It's an irreplaceable, irreparable loss. When they're gone, they're gone. That's why it's so important. That's why it's so important that it's in a form, soluble, absorbable to the youngest possible audiences. And that's why I thank Tulika and the two of you and your 14 other colleagues for such a lovely book. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think it's a brilliant thought to start with. Let's hold on to this thought of representation. What is the idea of inclusion, exclusion, and just the idea of literary in general when we talk about representation? I'm going to start with a metaphor. I'm going to talk about the book as a body, which has different working parts. These working parts are the states. How these parts are interlinked, but also have separate functions, different messages, issues, and concerns. How each story deals with a common thematic concern, but also moves away from it in terms of its unique stance, unique experience. It pushes one to interrogate and explore the often concealed. One needs to understand the subtextual connotations of the text, the illustrations, and we will touch upon the cover, the illustrations, and also some things that go beyond the text that we call subtext in the literary term. And of course, their role in shaping our idea of the subaltern and the peripheral. It is important to critically contemplate on the politics of representation, canon formation, as well as the need to foreground the voices of the marginalized, the unknown and the unsung heroes, asking a question that why are these heroes unknown to us? Abhiroop.
Thank you, Ankita. So, one of the first things that one would notice while reading this book is the epigraph. And as said by Professor Sainath, is that it's intended to be for the young generation who have been robbed of their history. And it could not be further from the truth. Because throughout our exposure of the Indian freedom struggle and its history, we have only been given content on the mainstream heroes that we are we have exposed to so politicized in the current day and age. And these heroes that are being focused on at the forefront of the movement. But this book finally highlights that those individuals would have been lost to the history if not for you and Bari. So a high number of the freedom fighters that Indians keep on like quoting on social media debates come from somewhat privileged backgrounds, and but India's majority are not that well off and never has been. So I can feel that, I feel when I say this that on behalf of many of my peers, that I'm really grateful for how Bari and you have focused on these marginalized heroes. So thank you for that, Professor Sainath. And this is precisely why I think that those who have read the book would agree why this would make an imperative addition to, say, the younger generation's classrooms. Because books covering relatively unknown freedom fighters, such as this, or like other books like Amar Chandra Katha's, like tribal leaders of the freedom struggle, has the potential to offer the youth like a non-politicized way to view the freedom fighters. And as with the big names associated with the freedom struggle, which mostly all of them has been politicized, so in addition to like recognizing these unknown heroes, like you say, the book is also offering them a view on the struggle of attaining the independence without the politicization, or like without associating them through some debate of that is like furthering their political parties' agendas during the campaigns. So with that, like I think, and also to speak about the sublime illustrations by Satwik Gade and the 14 other illustrators, it's just like the illustrations just amplified the perception of imbibing these stories. Like when I saw Satwik's illustration for, as Professor Sainath mentioned, the 2014 Hyderabad thing with Mallu Swarajam, the legend, when she swung around the slingshot. So your illustration really bought it, and like since I had seen the video, I could feel that this is what exactly everybody who would be reading these graphic novel would be like completely feel that they are inside that all and they're feeling that. So yeah, that was excellent. So to me, like these illustrations that just further weave into the interconnectedness of the storytelling that you have been covering since Bari and then your previous book and this graphic novel. So with that, like, thank you, Professor, and thank you, Satwik, Kripa, and the other illustrators. And so yeah,
I think you mentioned a very important point about how also the media influences in shaping our thoughts when it comes to visualizing. Which brings me to this graphic narrative that I always talk about whenever I talk about this graphic narrative about Bhimayana. That is one of my favorite. And then briefly talking about the epigraph, because as rightly said, and I quote, for generations of youngsters who have been robbed of their history. Well, the other idea is essentially of the country, how it becomes a unified whole. Precisely, because there are distinct parts and identities that come together. And that is how freedom works. In a sense, all the states come together for a unified cause. And it's not about a particular state or a region. Once we start diving deep into these chapters, these 16 stories, which are unique, independent, yet interconnected, we'll see they are fighting for a larger cause. All of them are working in sync. All of them are working in tandem with each other. With that, we'll move on to the first question to the panel.
So, Professor Sainath, your book features like stories of the marginalized communities and the freedom struggles that they're part of. So, and the crucial roles that they played in the India's freedom struggle. So, I remember asking the same question in a different way in my previous university, and you had an excellent answer. So, why do you think that their stories have been overlooked by the mainstream media?
Well, two things. One is, history is always written by the victors. You know, the Oxbridge elites did not, as Gandhi says, they didn't make your revolution, they didn't make your independence, but they certainly were at the top of the heap when it happened. Right? There's a beautiful African saying, a Swahili saying, about who gets to write history and why history represents things the way it does. The Swahili saying is, if lions were historians, the tales of the jungle would not always favor the hunter. If lions were historians, the tales of the jungle would not always favor the hunter. Right? So, I like to think of these people as lions. And they don't always favor the top and the hunter or the, top of the chain people. They're very outspoken. So, why were they unknown? The thing is that they didn't really fight to get known. They fought for Shankaraya, who was at 102, still capable of giving you a lecture online, and tells me, Arey, this family won't let me go outside because of COVID, which he has had twice. Between 100 and 102, he's had it twice. They don't let me go. But he said this to me when I asked him, and I realized what a big mistake the government had made in combining recognition and pension in the same law. When they brought this pension thing, people like Shankaraya and many of his leftist comrades officially turned it down. Shankaraya says, we fought for freedom, not for pensions. However, since recognition and pension were tied together, they didn't get the recognition either. Many people didn't get the recognition because you've tied those together in the law. Yeah? If you are recognized, you get a pension. Incidentally, the good thing about Shobharam Geharwar is that the Ashok Gehlot government gives the highest pension in the country for freedom fighters, 50,000 a month. Yeah? I hope he is re-elected. Okay? So, the reason they're unknown because in the writing of history, we don't take seriously what women did, what Dalits did, what Adivasis did. Now, Adivasis, for instance, they were the first to die for freedom, the last to benefit from it. Yeah? The Adivasis of today are fighting the descendants of the forest department that their ancestors fought. Yeah? Salihan, it's a story in the book. An Adivasi woman who led an uprising in 1930. It became to be known as the Saliha uprising, in the name of the village. Today there's a massive pillar commemorating the struggle and 19 names, but her name is not on it. There are names of communities which simply could not have been present in in that deep forest village in 1930. There is no way they could have been there. But their names dominate the list. So you rewrite history, you say anything you want. We have created many fake heroes. Okay? If you look on that Azadi Ka Amrut website, there is also their own list of forgotten heroes, some of whom I believe deserve to be remembered, were good, and some other forgotten heroes they've resurrected who are best forgotten. Okay? So when society, officialdom, upper caste historian writing all conspire to exclude these people, that's a reason.
I just want to add to what you said, Sainath, about, you spoke also about the Great Mutiny, and you also mentioned right now that it was the tribals who were the first to fight for freedom and the last to benefit from it. And I want to add to that the Santal uprising that happened in 1855 and the Great Mutiny happened in 1857, which was 2 years before the Great Mutiny. But unfortunately, our history textbooks never speak about Santal uprising, and even today, I'm reading to my child 8th standard history textbook, which mentions that it's the 1857 revolt which kickstarts the freedom movement. And you also mentioned that they are the last to benefit from it. And you also said that 8 heroes, close to 8 heroes, are from Odisha. And Odisha is the land today which is the most conflicted land if you look at Vedanta and all that Vedanta is doing, and land grab that is happening. They are losing their land. And Vedanta says that this is for the greater good of humanity. These are the people who lost their, who gave up their lives for the greater good of humanity, and we are taking away their land for the greater good of humanity. That's something.
That's absolutely something to think about, because if you read these stories, most of these people have gone back to their lives, living normal lives. That is something that made me think about a lot of things that we as people do in recognizing those who fought so much, yet we know so little. Back again to the thought, where canon formation, what kind of texts do people or universities or colleges subscribe to, I should say, when it comes to curriculum designing?
Actually, even speaking on the fact that I think speaking on like lands being grabbed, in the book you mentioned that Salyan's nephew is also having trouble with the forest department. So maybe that is like the irony, that somebody who fought so hard and even their ancestors are not being like left alone in the struggle of like reclaiming those things. So as you correctly mentioned that there has been a reemergence and amongst the young generation about these Marvel comic heroes as well as like the mangas or animes. So did that make it an easy decision when Tulika came to you about re-adapting this book for children in form of a graphic novel?
Well, actually, as she explained to you, this goes back, this conversation goes back. I didn't think of anyone else. I knew that very importantly, Tulika would honor the political essence of this book. I knew that for sure. So there was no doubt. And they have, as you can see, very high production values. I was very sure that they would do a good job. I was just frightened about the occasional, people look as they should look or they should recognize. Shobharam is very happy with his representation. Okay? Yeah, he has been showing it to people. Yeah, that this is how acha kiya na. That's his thing. Yeah, so there was no doubt or hesitation in my mind. There was no second thought about it. I didn't think of anyone else.
Certainly, Professor. Well, speaking on that matter, can you also talk about the different approaches you may have taken, let's say, while giving your editorial input from, let's say, transitioning from the original Pari articles to your previous book to this graphic novel?
See, the first of the articles appeared, not all appeared before. Some are in the book which are first time published. The first group, one group was about village revolts, which was in the Times of India, but in 2002 and 2002, the Pani Mora articles began. I went to that village and it was absolutely, it was like an Asterix village in Odia. They have a history of having driven administrations crazy. They're all Gandhians who never once set eyes on Gandhi. Never once set eyes. But when they got the order on Quit India, they took over the Sambalpur High Court and drove the police in the court crazy. The police came to arrest them for grabbing it. They said, are you British police or are you Indian police? If you are Indian police, you take your orders from us. One tailor, one farmer, one laborer sat as judge, peshkar and clerk. it actually they managed to confuse the police about what to do. So the police went to the magistrate and with a warrant saying, please sir, we need to arrest them. One of the great things in those days was that you had magistrates who actually followed the law and refused to sign, saying, you've got no names here, I can't give an unsigned warrant. You know, I bet those cops wished they were living in present day India. So he said, you don't sign your magistrate said, I won't sign this. So they took it to the deputy collector or someone. And he said, Arey, just write something there, A, B and C. So they wrote A, B and C. Criminal A, criminal B. In the court of Sambalpur, the Peshkar had to shout, A, Hazir ho, B, present yourself, C, present yourself, and felt like an idiot. Then they take them to the prison, they punish these guys, take them to a criminal prison, though they are political prisoners. These are all staunch Gandhians who immediately start fomenting doubt and discontent among the criminal prisoners who are being offered 500 rupees to go and fight. Their family will get 500 rupees for them to go and fight in the World War. And these chaps ask them, is your life worth only 500 rupees? Your family is worth only 500 rupees. So half the criminal prisoners who had recruited dropped out. The British overnight shifted them to a political prisoners jail because they created so much trouble with the criminal prisoners. They are just, when 2002 I ran into this group, they were always, and one of the moving, touching things about that village, every Friday, I think was the time 4:17 or 5:17, Gopal, 5:17, the assassination timing, 5:17. Every Friday at 5:17 in that village, in a temple which they forcibly entered with 400 Dalits in 1942, they sit and sing Gandhi's favorite bhajans at the hour 5:17. Yeah, it's moving. I mean, you feel that lump in your throat when you realize why Friday evening 5:17. Yeah. So it started from there. The new process started from there. The last of them died this year of the Magnificent Seven. This January, 22 days before I went to visit him one more time. So it was then 2007, Lakshmi Panda and other stories came in the Hindu Sunday magazine. Baji Muhammad, the most extraordinary contemporary. He was 98 when we met him, 92 when we met him first. I started learning so much about how different we are and how similar we are. But some of these people will never be replicated. They'll never ever be replicated. A Baji Muhammad got beaten up much more badly in independent India than in British times. In British times, he was put into a cell which I have photographed. 8 feet by 8 feet, 6 to 8 people were put in the cell. When they had to do toilet, they had to excrete in a terracotta pot, which one of them would, accompanied by a guard, would go and throw in the forest. But in 1992 December, he got the worst injuries of his life, sitting with 500 other Gandhians on a protest outside the Babri Masjid. They attacked him because they recognized the Muslim from the skull cap. They broke his skull. He spends a month in hospital, and I just cannot understand it. He had not an iota of anger. Not an iota of anger towards that, towards those. Nor did he have any iota of anger to the British who had treated him the way they did. And I remember Baji more and more in a time of incredible hatred. Yeah? So these were the things slowly we put across together, did the interviews over 20 years. That's how it happened.
Thank you, sir. I can see the illustration of Baji Mohammed here, just for the reference, the cracked skull. Talking about illustrations, I think this is my chance to talk about the cartoons, about the illustrations that the very first story, Hausa by Sitara's Rebel, illustrated by Miss Kripa. She's a soldier, she's an actor, she's a spy, and she joined the Tufan Sena, the Whirlwind Army. And if you think about it, it all goes back to the origin, the struggles of the family, the struggles of the parents. The stories are quite intense, and the illustrations, they quite speak for themselves. Even if you look at the cover, and the cover of the book is projected here, at first glance, you can see that all the independent stories, something interesting is happening here. They're all coming together in synchronization. The colors, the combinations, the red, the white, the black, it all absolutely blends. The narrative absolutely blends with the illustrations. So, very interesting thought when I was reading it, the idea of the aesthetic, which is usually tied up with beauty, in a sense, when we talk about the general idea of beauty. It has a lot to do with the senses, actually. So the sensorial aspect that the illustrators are pushing the readers into thinking in a certain way. I'd like to know more about the thought process when you were portraying, you're looking at the narrative and then you're coming across these videos, these instances. How has the experience been for Satwik and for Kripa both?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot since I met you guys and we asked about it. And earlier I was talking to Kripa also about it. And I think a lot of times when we talk about illustrations, we tend to focus on the skill of how a particular person is portrayed or how the illustration looks, the aesthetic of it, how it draws you in and all that. But for any of that to sort of come out, some amount of skill is required, but also what goes into it is a lot of feeling, I think. And I think a particular story needs to captivate us before we are able to do justice to it visually. And for me, the process started when I heard that Mr. Sainath had published this book, and I heard him speak about it in Jaipur Literary Festival and then at the Hindu Lit Fest here in Chennai. And each time I would just listen to the lecture, feel very overwhelmed. After the lecture would get over, I would just go to the bathroom and cry for 15 minutes. And this was just a process that happens every single time. Then I would, even while I was illustrating this book, I would watch videos of Madhu Swarajyam and just not be able to contain the tears. And they were not all tears of sadness, inspiration, or just feelings of being overwhelmed. And that's also, I think, what works in all of the other stories as well, if I may speak for the other illustrators who are not there, that I think all of them are people who really felt for the story. And a really nice thing that Tulika did for us was also gave us a lot of freedom in picking the stories ourselves. So I chose Madhu Swarajyam because I'm from, I speak Telugu, and I could listen to her talking, and I could understand the context and also understand her words. And it is just really incredible how some of the things, again, talking about the history, typically when I read about figures from the history, they were typically done by Amar Chitrakatha, and there would be stories about freedom fighters, and there is a certain lens through which these stories are told from a very traditional sanskari sort of like a standpoint. They all sort of come in, and so of course at that point of time I was too young to sort of understand these things about like lens and framework and all that. But this book then became a an opportunity for me to sort of think, okay, like what would a person who is inspired by those comics, but has in the process of growing up, like been able to problematize them, how would such a person illustrate a chapter out of history now that they know what the problem with the traditional representation is? And so, in the story, I hope you guys get to read it, for Madhu Swarajyam especially, most of the comics, like I followed like a very Tinkle Lama Chitrakatha style of illustrating it, and then I sort of tweaked it. I sort of tried to take away this thing that typically exists in right-wing narratives about personality cults, about how one single person drove the whole thing forward, how everybody lobbied behind that one single person. And then I tried to put a perspective where, or at least tried to imagine it in this way, like where one person is sort of carried forward by the masses, how their ability to empathize and their ability to feel that they themselves are part of everybody they see around them. Like, how would you tell the story of that sort of a person? And yeah, that's sort of the process that went into it. Because I think the skill is something, sure, like I was drawing from the time I was a kid and learned something through college and all of that. But I think in order to illustrate this particular story, I had to sort of unlearn, reinterpret a lot of what I had already learned through my formative years. And that process had been going on for some time, and I was able to apply it in this particular book. So yeah, really grateful for the opportunity. And one more point I wanted to add is that after every single lecture I would hear from Mrs. Sainath, I would think in my mind that, you know, oh my God, this book should become a graphic novel. And then I would not even be inspired by it. I would automatically become very sad and morose, thinking that how will I ever illustrate so many stories as a graphic novel? Of course, it never struck me that I don't have to do it alone. Like whenever I'm talking generally, like at colleges and all of that, like I'll always say, oh, the spirit of collaboration, we can all come together and sort of do it. But when it came to me, I didn't think of that at all. Like I was just say, I can never do this. How will I do all of these stories? And then, like magic, you know, sort of, I get a call from Tulika saying that, you know, we're doing this thing and 16 different illustrators are doing 16 stories. My God, that is so simple. That was solved so easily. So, yeah.
Listen, you cheated, okay? You told me that you wanted to illustrate all the 16 stories at one point. You wanted to, right? Firstly, thank you to Tulika for making the book now more accessible to a larger range of people, especially children, because a book like this is visual storytelling. A book like this is a parallel history. It's a parallel narrative, I would say. For me, it was hard because I had already read Sainath's the original book, and to keep the text away and watch Hausha Tai's videos and look at her face. I come from the land of Hausha Tai and Savitri Bai Phule, and that's why I took up the story. It was very personal to me. In Marathi, house means enthusiasm. And not once in the entire interview, she was 90 when you interviewed her, 92 when Sainath interviewed her, and not once in the entire interview, she loses her unwavering confidence and the enthusiasm in her face while narrating her entire story. And I wanted to capture that, and that's why I've tried to create more portraits of her in the book, you know, and it's been an amazing experience. And I take up a book like this. I took up a book like this because it's only for personal transformation. It transforms me. And I would like to add one more point to what you said about histories, about parallel histories that are written. If you look at Gond art or Varli art, they are also history. They are visual representation, and it's a parallel history in many ways, and unfortunately we don't look at them. We've categorized them as tribal art, and I have many things to say, but I think I'll pass on the mic, and maybe you can come back to me later once you.
Well, to Satwik and Kripa. So I think most of us who read this graphic novel came to the conclusion that this was it's like very implicitly done, and like this book features like a diverse range of people from different parts of India. So how did you both approach the visual representation of these stories in regards to that?
A fair bit of very regular research went into it. One advantage is that there are, thanks to the internet, you can find very unlikely photos that you just didn't expect would exist. You can sometimes find photos of the people that you're looking for as well. In other cases, of course, it was about doing a bit of research in terms of, even if you don't know about those people particularly, like what sort of clothes might they have worn, what sort of what did the landscape around them look like, what did their houses look like, just some amount of research into that. But those sort of come down to the detail of it. I think that's sort of the last thing that you think about as you're sort of sketching or fairing things. I will come back to the same thing that I chose a story that I am familiar with because I come from that part of the country, and I relate to the language, I relate to the culture, and I relate to what Malli Swarajam herself said, and also political leanings wise, everything sort of matched up, and that's why I picked that particular story. And once again, I would just say that the larger research, or sort of what I really felt I needed to do the representation correctly, was just carry that feeling, that very, very heavy, overwhelmed feeling that I got when I saw the videos or when I heard about them. I think like just carrying that within me while illustrating, like that was the really sort of challenging part, like just staying with those emotions, and I think ultimately, like, these are all stories that technically are supposed to inspire us, and yet somehow we live in a world that where it's become very easy to be jaded, where there are so many positive, inspirational stories around us, like just being marketed to us every single day, that and so many of them are like so fake that we're sort of scared of feeling anymore, because we've been sort of lied to and cheated like so many times by sort of projecting something not inspiring as inspiring, that we are now like scared to be really inspired by inspiring things. So how do we suspend that disbelief within ourselves and really sort of believe that a revolution is possible, that these people that we're talking about, that we can be those people, or that we can see those people in the upcoming generation. I think the suspending of that disbelief and really believing that this can be possible, and really believing in the kind of positivity, in that kind of positivity, I think like that was the driving force behind the illustrations.
I just add to that as you said about finding photographs online, I think ours would be perhaps the last generation of illustrators who can find, who would not find perhaps photographic archival material to refer back to, as Sainath says in his online interview, that how Shatai would have looked when she was 18 years old or 16 years old. We did not have the photographic reference of that, so we have to actually imagine. And every generation post that will find photographic evidence, because we are permeated by images today. So I think that makes our role also a little more, I find it really interesting and exciting. And I also want to add a little bit about the visual storytelling aspect, that, I work with children, and when you ask a child to draw a freedom fighter, the typical drawing of a child would be, as Sainath would say, an Oxbridge man standing and saluting a flag, and never a woman, leave alone a Muslim woman, and leave alone any tribal person for that matter. So, books like this book, it then becomes an enabler for so many people today. I work with the marginalized community, and when I take this book, it enables them to imagine that they can be also a part of a movement like this. Because the freedom movement is not just about a frontline person who's fighting a war or picking up an arm and fighting, but it's also as much about resistance, about the women who resisted. Haushatai's way of fighting was equally as fierce as a Salihan's or Malu Swarajyam who took a weapon, and so was Baji Muhammad's. So I think a book like this becomes such an important book because it's an enabler.
One word that I can really, really think about, and I want the audience to also think about, is resist. For everything. Resist when it comes to facing any kind of evil, resist when it comes to any kind of pressure, even in your normal life. What's central to this debate is the idea of who speaks for whom. And this has led to the foregrounding of the notions of authenticity as well as experience in writing that seeks to bring the peripheral to the mainstream. There is a set of criteria, parameters that Sir also suggested, as even in Lakshmi Panda's story, if you look at the Odisha's spirited soldier states in her narrative, and I quote, "Never been to jail, had been trained, but never shot a bullet from a rifle, made sacrifices that have no corporeal existence, if the government has to see it that way, and therefore no recognition from the state." They're not looking for rewards. They are the unsung heroes because they are denied the recognition they deserve. And therefore arises the need for this representation. Something quite interesting to think about is the role of personal protests. Freedom and independent become two different ideas. Though they may sound synonymous, they're not actually.
Well, thank you, Ankita, rightfully said. And one of the last questions is that to Professor Sainath. In the book that you have highlighted Captain Bhau and his point of how India is independent but not free. And similarly, you have, as you have mentioned during your speech about N. Sankaraya, refusing Chief Minister Stalin's 10 lakh rupee cash prize, saying that this is not what we fought for. We fought for freedom, not the pensions. So for those of them who has not read the book, can you elaborate on the distinction that this freedom and independence, as they mention, that we may still be facing today?
Small aside, your two Chennaikarans, and I'm proud that maybe we had some role in that with the stories we did. When Stalin came to power, he started a new prize in Tamil Nadu, which is the state equivalent of Bharat Ratna. Yeah. In the first year, it was given to N. Sankaraya. In the second year, it was given to R. Nallakkannu. What they did with the prize is really what matters, who they are. Both accepted the certificate of the prize. Shankaraya returned the 10 lakhs, donated it. He donated it to the COVID relief fund of the Chief Minister. Nallakkannu took the prize, added 5,000 rupees to the 10 lakhs and contributed it to the CM's relief fund. I mean, this is the kind of character these chaps are. Yeah. I lost. Your thread was, I lost the thread. No. Oh yeah. Every one of them in different words, different languages, tell you about the difference between independence and freedom. Captain Bao put it in a classic way. Another cantankerous old guy who was a warrior. He founded the Tufan Sena, which was the armed wing of the Prati Sarkar. In 1943, when the British were doing badly in World War II, many colonies saw revolts, including, by the way, in India, Chittagong, Midnapur. Many of these places set up provisional underground governments. In 1943, a group of farmers and laborers in Satara princely state declared secession from the British Empire and called themselves the Prati Sarkar. Sangli was part of Satara in those days. And by the way, Hausabai's father was the leader, Nana Patil. He was elected as an MP in 57. Now, each one of them, Captain Bao, his distinction is that he carried out one of the greatest train robberies ever. And later, when we went to meet him, first time, many years ago, his family said some days he's not there, some days he's clear as a bell. So you know what we did? We took his chair from home and Captain Bao and seated him at the railway track where he had conducted the robbery. He sat silently for 5-10 minutes and then spoke for an hour and a half, giving every detail of the attack. And he named the two squads, he named every member of the two squads who were involved. वो पाटिल का लड़का था ना, वो भी था. वो पवार का बेटा, वो भी था. He named the damn squad members from 1943, okay, and he was 94 already. When I was praising him, I think something like Premabai Kantak praising Gandhi about independence and his role in the freedom struggle. He said, we fought for two things. We fought for freedom and independence. We achieved independence. One beautiful sentence. We fought for freedom and independence. We achieved independence. Later on in the interview, he says, freedom remains the monopoly of a few. And he uses an old Marathi saying, he who holds the hare, the rabbit family, he who holds the hare, he is the hunter. Like in the north, jiski lati uski bhains. Yeah? He who holds the hare, he is the hunter. And then he gave me a detailed thing on the difference between every one of them. Mallu Swaraj, Hausabai, everybody saw that difference. For them, independence was a fairly simple project. It was, one, throwing the British colonial ruler out of the country. Second, forming a nation state based on citizens' rights. You were not a second-class person in your country. It was based, and this is one thing that I want to tell you about. If you want the finest distillation of that idealism of the freedom struggle and that understanding of the difference, for them, freedom was a much bigger project than independence. Independence, throw out the foreign ruler, create a nation state based on laws. Freedom was freedom from hunger, freedom from indignity, freedom from insecurity. And that distillation you will find in the Constitution of India, in the preamble and in the directive principles of state policy. The right to work, the right to education, the right to health, the implied right to nutrition. Many of these people may never have read the Constitution, but their idea is inform it. Because tens of millions of people thought that way. And I think it was a phenomenal achievement to put it into that directive principles of state policy. And even in the preamble, you are saying justice for all, social, economic and political, and social comes first. The framers were not careless people. They had an idea of why they were positioning social as first. They speak of liberty, equality, fraternity, and you have that brilliant speech of Ambedkar explaining to you, you can't cherry pick from these three. One without the other two is useless, two without the other one is useless. You know, where he explains, you have one man, one vote, you know, but you have one man, one vote, one value, you have a problem. What does he say there? He says, today we have achieved independence, we have democracy in politics, but no democracy in economics, no democracy in society. We have equality in politics, but lack of it, absence of it in economy and in society. And I think every one of them is pointing us to freedom is a much more bigger, serious project. I will end with this note of, does that spirit continue? Yes. One, in 2019, it gave me a great deal of pleasure to see thousands and thousands of young students, teenage students, standing at the gates of their college and reading out the preamble of the Indian Constitution. It was so moving. My own students were there, and I told them I was moved. Of course, I had to add a rider saying that, you know, there are some other interesting pages also. Try reading those. You know, but it's hard to tell that to a generation which believes that reading will kill them. So that was one. And the second instance, she said, resist, resist. The farmers' agitation at the gates of Delhi was the greatest. Did your media ever tell you this? The largest, the greatest peaceful, democratic protest for justice in the last 20 years. In 2011, there was such a rebellion in the United States when 8 to 10,000 young techies and others occupied Zuccotti Park in New York and told Wall Street, you are the 1%, we are the 99%. Powerful slogan that inspired people other parts of the US. It took the New York Police Department 9 weeks to turf all of them out of Zuccotti Park. Your farmers stayed there 53 weeks until the laws were withdrawn. Okay? They showed us the meaning of resistance. They showed us that, you know, you have to stand up. Don't be bullied. They fought pitched battles with paramilitary security forces, police, which dug 10 foot by 10 foot, holes, trenches in the national highway, violating the law of the government itself of punishment for defacement of public property, for destruction. They survived one of the worst winters in 40 years. Okay? You know how many farmers died in this? 720 plus farmers died. Some of them old people from being, after a few days after being hit with icy cold water cannon. 78-year-old guy. Yeah? So they then went through one of the worst summers in Delhi. They went through some of the nastiest rains and flooding, but they hung in there and refused to be thrown out. Both are a continuation of that spirit of these people in the book.
Well, thank you, Professor, for your insights. And thank you for writing this book and your work with Bari. So you have already told this in your online interview with Tulika, but for the audience, could you reiterate, like, what do you hope for the readers of the young generation who would be reading this graphic novel to take away from this book?
See, in a very simple line, it boils down to why I wrote such a book. Okay? I did that for two reasons. Three reasons, you can say. One, I wrote this book for the people in it. Their stories deserve to be told, their stories needed to be told. Second, I wrote it for the post-1947 generations who need to know their stories in order to better script our own. In order to better shape our own stories, we needed to know theirs. And the third, as I said, I wrote it for a generation robbed of its history. And I learned from different historians of a different caliber. And I felt that I had something to offer on that front. As I said, I never went to journalism school, but I believe that the history I studied in JNU, which continues to be under the most vicious attack, that history that I learned there, from the Panikars and the Thapars and the Bipin Chandras and co., made all the difference to me as a journalist. And that's, by the way, that's about one of the reasons I like the ACJ idea is it's a postgraduate thing. I believe that you need a decent degree in humanities or social sciences before being plonked in front of a camera, as so often happens. At age 18, a kid is covering parliament who doesn't know what bicameral system means. Not her fault, not his fault. I think journalism is a postgraduate course, honestly. Yeah.
Before we open the floor for questions, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about fragments and frameworks. When we talk about these stories and the struggles, though it may seem like fragmented because every experience is unique, every experience is different, all of them come together to make a framework, and what brilliant illustrations to tell that. And also the fact that, since Professor mentioned about humanity, I remember as a child, even in my school, my teacher used to tell me, humanity mein bahut scope hai, wo karo. So I think with that, because ma'am, you had some thoughts to share with us, I think while the audience asks the questions, we can move across. All right. The floor is open for questions.
Yeah. Firstly, I think there's one of the things that really astonished me about these people. Many of them never stopped fighting. Okay, Shankaraya never stopped fighting. Yeah. He went on to lead the All India Kisan Sabha. Nallakannu, played a leading role in the struggle against temple lands, exploiting the tenant. Yeah? That's why those struggles made Tamil Nadu a very different state from UP or Bihar or any one of those. The kind of societal struggles that they never gave up on those. In fact, Nallakannu was tortured in 1948 in jail after independence. He had a mustache and he doesn't have one now. all the cigarette marks are there that the inspector Krishnamurti imposed on him because of the struggle against the landlords in Tanjavur and that side. Again, another peculiar thing, he harbors no anger or animosity and never sought revenge against Krishnamurti, though his party emerged the largest opposition in the assembly. So that many of them never stopped fighting. The Panimora crowd, when I went back one visit to see all 7 of them when they were alive, 2 of them were not there in the 90s. They were sitting on the dharna at the block office demanding a telephone for Panimora. And the BDO, the block developer, he was an idiot who didn't know who they were. And he came out and told them, go away and all that. And the police came and said, you moron, do you know who these guys are? They'll make your life miserable. And at 90s, in their mid-90s, they were still fighting for their village, for their people. That for me is the Shobharao Geharwal, still up and ready to do anything. Do you know why that man lives at 98? He's holding on because he is protecting the freedom fighters' Bhavan in Ajmer from takeover by the real estate mafia. He said, take me to Ashok Gehlot. This is my one request. I have nothing. I don't want anything from him. Take over the freedom fighters' Bhavan. Make it a heritage museum for future generations. Every week, this 98-year-old goes and sits alone in the freedom Bhavan to send a message to the mafia, you cannot appropriate this prime property while I am here. So they all continued in one way or the other, they continued. Yeah, yeah, that's right. When Hausabai's father was, a fugitive, they came and sealed the house, as she says. They seized their lands and sealed the house and gave them one room. Hausabai's grandmother, Nana Patil's mother, she had one lungi of Nana Patil's, a white lungi. She made her own private protest. She cut that lungi into 2 and stitched 2 white blouses with it. Gocharabai. And she wore those for the next 3 decades. After independence, she continued to wear them. The family, which had achieved some status and was better off, had to persuade her, but she only started in the late 60s before she died, but only white blouses. That was her personal protest against the arrest of her son. There is a line of resistance, a line of things. And most of these people, maybe Salihan couldn't because she went back to utter poverty and devastation. But most of them went back and did something more.
Hello, sir. First of all, I'd like to thank Kripa ma'am for acknowledging the 1855 Santhal Hul, because I have not heard a lot of people speak about it. Even if one goes to Google and search the freedom of India, it shows 1857 and not 1855. And apart from that, I'd also like to highlight that there were a lot of revolts that started in the late 1700s by the tribal people. A lot of were Munda rebellion, and it was in 1780 that Tilka Manjhi started a freedom fight against the British. So my question to you is that, like you said, that the social freedom should come before economic and should come before economic freedom. But a tribal-based state like Jharkhand, its education system doesn't have the basic structure of tribal freedom, tribal revolution. So, do you think educational-based revolution should lead the social freedom?
No, what do said? I didn't. I said that the Constitution's framers chose to privilege social over economic and political. They were not saying that economic and political are unimportant. They were not saying that the other two were unimportant, but they just wanted to make the point that our own society has so many flaws to deal with, so many wrong things. Oh, incidentally, speaking of humanities, which Akita was speaking of, and joining it to your point on education, I want to tell you two things. One is your new education policy, national education policy. Its understanding of humanities is the 64 kalas of ancient India. So you know what all comes under humanities now? The 64 kalas were simply a listing of occupational groups. And they include cockfighting and burglary. Okay? So, this is your liberal studies. Their understanding of liberal studies is 64 kalas. Please read the policy. About the second thing, the Adivasis were up in rebellion within 3 years of the Battle of Plassey. From 1760 to 1806, there was a rebellion, very mean-mindedly called Chuar Rebellion. Chuar in Bengali is not just chor, it is chor plus neech, low. It's a kind of criminalized thing, and they really, to this day, upper caste historians completely use that term, Chuar Rebellion, without thinking where did this word come from. By the way, there's a lot of like that, the way we all use the word vernacular. I beg you never to use the word vernacular. It makes English sound like something more than a language, and you should know where this word vernacular came from. It came from Thomas Babington Macaulay, who, what was his background? He was a Latin scholar. Macaulay was a Latin scholar who said, we need Indians only in blood, but Europeans in intellect. He said, you're a bunch of useless guys, and that a single shelf of European literature was more than all the libraries of it in Arabic and in India and China. Why did he address local writing as vernacular? You will not find it in your Oxford dictionary. It's a Latin term derived from vernaculus. You'll find it in that huge heritage dictionary, 2.5 feet by 10 inches. Vernaculus, language of the home-born slave. Now for us it's become like regional. We think when we use the word, we think we're saying regional language. Why don't you say regional language? Why should we say anything? Why don't we say Indian language? Why don't we say Bengali language? Why don't we say English language? About the Santal Hool. 2 years ago, I addressed that university named after, it's called in Purulia, in Babani Mahato's district, called Birsa Sidhu Khano University. And none of the students I was addressing knew who Sidhu and Khano were. They knew Birsa because Birsa has been valorized a bit, especially because of switching religions and switching back and everything else. Sidhu and Khanu were those two brothers, Murmus, the Santals. Sidhu and Khanu were those who led the Santal Hool. Do you know that there is an account of it written by an East India Company army major, saying, not a single soldier amongst us did not feel ashamed of what we had done. they lured the Santals forward with blanks in their rifles. Yeah? So when they came forward, they shot them actually with real rounds. And then something surprised them. The Santals would not stop advancing. They shot row after row of them, drowned the group in blood. Out of 60,000 people mobilized, 20,000 lost their lives. Lost their lives. Yeah? And still they kept advancing. That they would pick themselves up, the drummers would drum and come forward. You should read that Major's, think of the barbarity which they descended to against the Santals. And yet, Sidhu and Kano, they have a university in their name now, and most people in the university have no idea who they are. That again is the history written by the victors.
So, sir, my question would bring us back to the beginning of the conversation. Okay. Yeah, thank you. So, in the beginning, you spoke about visuals to drive journalism in today's world, and I was wondering about the potential of the graphic novel. So, I definitely think that its scope has grown more now. We've moved on from the sanitized version of Amar Chitrakatha to books like Bhimayana and A Garden in the Wasteland, and I'm sure your book will prove to be a very valuable addition to that narrative. But at the same time, I can't help but think that graphic narratives, they're not exactly the most accessible in the Indian market right now. And I don't mean that necessarily because of audiences, but because of how the very publishing industry and the very book market is structured in India. So my question would be, how do you think we can make visual-driven journalism, which has been going on for some time now, more accessible to the average viewer in India?
The part about the graphic thing and the potential there, I think the two of them should answer you. But about journalism more visual, it's what we do every single day in Paris. Incidentally, my base principle in my reporting for 43 years, I take all the photographs myself because I'm telling the story. I know what I mean. I know this, so I do my photographs myself. 43 years of reporting. Yeah. There's another construct on which you can speak of visual. It's about writing visually. It's about writing in ways. When I teach your classes journalism, I always mention about word pictures. For instance, I'll give you one example. If I say, number of people registered as job seekers on the live registers of employment exchanges was 40 million in the last 10 years. It's a figure that will shock you, but after a while it loses its sting. It doesn't leave a picture in your head. How would I write that? I would write, if the 40 million people registered at the employment exchanges were put shoulder to shoulder in a single queue, so close, 2 to a meter, my nose in the other guy's collar, 2 people to a meter, 2,000 to a kilometer, your registered job seekers, that queue would be 3.5 times the Indian coastline. You will never forget that picture. Will you? Would you ever forget the picture of the coastline being covered 3 times? So you try for word pictures. Journalism has many ways, entry points into visual. As a text guy and photographer, those are my inputs into visuals, trying to make this. Like for instance, incidentally, I do not give physical descriptions of the characters. It's very deliberate. I want you to imagine the character. I want you to imagine the character from the spirit that they display, from the conversation they make. And I think that Kripa and Satwik and all the others got that. There is nowhere have I written bald, bespectacled, that Time magazine kind of stuff of description, which are really bugs me. I'm saying that leave some space for the imagination of the reader, what this person would look like. Yeah? And there are the photographs in the book. Yeah? So there are many ways of being visual, but theirs is a field I am not competent to advise you on.
Well, Satwik, would you like to add something to that?
I think generally the reason why graphic novels in India aren't quite as popular, that's probably like a separate topic to discuss, but one way that we can address that is, for instance, insisting that all public libraries purchase graphic novels, especially if there is something related to the Indian freedom struggle which is being published as a graphic novel, then there should be an automated process for everyone to sort of order it and for it to become part of public libraries. And in other countries where we just generally say that, like, hey, in this particular country, France or US or like something, graphic novels are incredibly popular because there are readers. It's not because there are readers. The readers, I mean, how can there be more readers than readers in India? Like, we're the most populous nation in the world. What they have is, the moment a book comes out, public libraries order it. There are structural systems to encourage publishers to keep publishing graphic novels. And I think as long as that part of it is taken care of, graphic novels will keep coming out. And when they keep coming out and they'll stay on the bookshelf, eventually people will also start reading it. It's people don't read it because of lack of access, not because they're not interested in graphic novels, because in that case they won't read American graphic novels either, right? So why are Indians reading American graphic novels but not Indian graphic novels?
Yeah, I agree with Satwik that it's not because of anything else, but lack of access to these books. And I'd just like to add one more point, that when it's a written book, the written word rudely assumes that the reader can read in a certain language, whereas visual language is a universal language. So, and I strongly believe that when a child enters the classroom for the first time, the teacher assumes that she or he cannot read, whereas that's not true. A child at the age of 4 or 5 is far more visually literate than a literate adult of 25. So I strongly believe in the power of visual storytelling. And I'm so glad that Pari and so many others have also democratized the space, because it becomes then a democratic space for anybody and everybody to capture a moment through their camera or visually storytell.
I think we can take one last question before we wrap up with today's event. Yes, please.
Just a pretty small question. It's about the lettering in the book. I just flipped through it, and most of it I think is computer type, and some of it, couple of them are hand lettered. Was this a conscious choice, or what was motivation behind that?
I think a combination of personal choice as well as time constraints. I think went for computer lettering because it's easier to edit, chop, change, and all of that. And also personal choice. I think now a great range of handwritten fonts are available. I think I can choose from a range of things, like where I feel like this particular typeface represents what my written word should look like. So.
Thank you to the panel. May we please have a huge round of applause.
One last question. I was reading an article which talked about how Dalit digital artists are de-Brahmanizing visual Indian arts. So I was asking, were you conscious of the fact that the visual shouldn't be Brahminical in nature, and is there something like Brahminical visual art or non-Brahminical visual art? So while illustrating, were you conscious of that?
Yeah, I think that's why I was talking about Amar Chitakatha, and yeah, there are visual representations which are Brahminical, but growing up with that and coming from certain communities, I think, at least for me, the process of de-Brahmanizing my artwork is a continuous one. I'm still learning how to do that, and I have a lot of artists, especially thanks to Instagram and other social media, I'm able to follow Dalit artists, and from them I try to see and learn, I try to talk and learn about how I can de-Brahmanize my art.
I think it's a very important question, and as Satwik said, I follow the same. De-Brahmanizing, and we all carry so many biases. I'm trying to shed a bias every single day. And I think it's a continuous process. I don't think it ends at a certain point. I'll carry this all my life.
Yeah, I guess the one solution is, of course, to have more Dalit artists featuring, because I think it's easier for that art to be represented than for artists who are trained in a particular way to de-Brahmanize themselves. Like, that is a process that artists should follow, but also that's why equal opportunity is such an important conversation. I think, like, we need to have at least the number of illustrators or the number of people working in a particular area should at least be proportional to the population, and Brahmins are way overrepresented and other communities are way underrepresented. So I guess.
Well, thank you, Satwik and Kripa, for your insights. A huge round of applause for all the panelists. And
And Tulika Publishers as well.
so, thank you, Professor, thank you, Kripa, and thank you, Satwik. So, before we wrap up, if anybody would like to get their books signed by Satwik, Kripa, and Professor Sainath, feel free to do so. And it is. Thank you, everyone.